In this episode of the Julius Rochelle podcast, I'm joined by Martin Belanger, the former senior vice president of Pieridae Energy, which spent more than 10 years trying to get a multi-billion-dollar LNG export terminal up and running in Nova Scotia, only to see the final project shelved before construction actually began. So, Mr. Belanger has first-hand experience with how Canada strangles oil and gas projects, and now he's no longer bound by a confidentiality agreement. Marty, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This story is timely, and I'm glad people are talking about this. I mean, I have some unfinished business. I want to talk about this. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that when you posted, I was like, okay, there's a story underneath this, and I mean, just hearing about what that story was about, it's sort of the perfect example of what's going on all throughout this country. And just talking here before the show, you were mentioning that this isn't the first time that you've run into this sort of thing. You've been involved with a couple of other monster projects here in Canada that have run into the same brick wall.
Yeah, specifically Keystone XL, and then later on Energy East. Keystone was successful. I worked at TransCanada as a director of liquid pipelines for TransCanada. So Keystone was a success. We tried to duplicate it with Keystone XL, and no go. No go. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know
And
I noticed that this project you spent 10 years on that. How long did you work on the
No, let me clarify. I did not
not
spend 10 years on Goldboro, but it
yeah.
was a 10-year project. But I can speak about the whole history of Goldboro and how it came about because, it's important to like some, when I think you and I connected today because yesterday I was talking about Goldboro because LNG is in the forefront of discussions again. Mark Carney is talking about LNG and so it's in the forefront. And so I wanted to remind people that there's a long history of LNG in this country. And then yesterday when I made that comment, that post about LNG, I had some people like who only remember the last couple of years, and they remember the last couple of years where the company, Pieridae was struggling in the last couple of years, and people just see that as it's a company, it's the company that failed. It's like no, it's not the company that failed. The project was 10 years. So what people don't understand, and what I'd love to talk about is the 8 years leading into it, right?
Yeah.
You're spending 8 years where you're fighting the government, and then at the end you're so desperate that then you're asking for. Anyways, we'll get into it. So
Yeah.
yeah, people
Yeah, I
don't know
mean,
the story. That's all. that's
yeah.
that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, why don't we start with the project itself to give people a sense of the scale and the hurdles that you guys had to go through over those whole 10 years.
Yeah, so the project itself was the brainchild of a man named Alfred Sorensen. So Alfred is better known for Kitimat LNG. So Alfred was a pioneer
Okay.
in natural gas. He had 30 years in the industry. He was a trader for Duke Energy, American companies, worked in England, worked all over the place. And Alfred saw, weirdly, this is a weird twist. So Alfred saw an opportunity in 2011 to we were running out of gas. Believe it or not, like in 2011, Alberta, North America was kind of running out of gas. And we hadn't discovered shale yet. Fracking was in its infancy. And so we were running out of gas. And what Alfred was doing is he was working on a gasification project up at Kitimat. Like Kitimat originally was going to be a place where we accepted gas from Qatar and other places. And then things like changed really quickly. Suddenly we, fracking, the Montney, shale gas and stuff like that. Now we had an abundance of gas. And Alfred quickly pivoted, and rather than do a regasification project in Kitimat, he started doing an export terminal, and then he sold that project to Chevron and to the partners. It ultimately became LNG Canada kind of thing. So Alfred was in that business. And then in 2012, Alfred's got a lot of money, private money. He did well with that project. So he started Pieridae because Alfred, through his marketing contacts and through his work, had seen this crazy opportunity in Nova Scotia to produce LNG in Nova Scotia and ship it to Europe. And so that was his brainchild. And when you meet people in those days and you're talking about that, you go, makes no sense until you start seeing how it does make sense, right? So let's just start with Nova Scotia. I mean, if you can make liquefied natural gas in Nova Scotia and ship it to the markets in Europe, you're 3 days closer than the nearest competitors, the Americans, right? The Americans at that time were doing LNG in the Gulf. They were starting to get going with LNG in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's when you get on a globe in front of you and you look at where the boats are traveling to get to Europe, the places that want LNG, like Germany, Holland, places like that, Goldboro was close. So it's like, well, is there infrastructure in Goldboro? And it turns out there's huge infrastructure in Goldboro because Goldboro is actually where, so offshore Nova Scotia, there's oil and gas.
Yeah.
There was a project called Deep Panuke by Encana at the time, and it came to shore in Nova Scotia. And then when it came to shore in Nova Scotia, it came to shore in Goldboro, and there it got onto a pipeline. Enbridge built a pipeline from Goldboro that went south, that fed the province, but then went into the United States. So at one point, Nova Scotia was producing natural gas that it was using itself and exporting to the continental US. And the guys who built this pipeline from Enbridge, they were brilliant. It's called the Maritimes and Northeast Pipeline. They built it knowing that someday there might not be offshore gas, and the pipeline was built to be reversible. So I was like, wow, that's fascinating. So there's this reversible pipeline. And then if you look at, and so then people go, okay, where's the gas going to come from? Well, the gas can come from at the time, Alfred's thought was we were going to reverse that pipeline and now bring gas from, now the shale explosion's happening, and now there's gas in Pennsylvania and all sorts of places, and we were going to bring gas from the north or from the south up north through this reverse pipeline, liquefy it in Nova Scotia, and ship it to Europe. And that project, so this is 2013, 2014, and this project is shaping up. And the engineering is underway, and it's all done with private money. So Pieridae is a private money at this point doing this project. Spending on engineering, doing what we call front-end engineering, spending like $30-40 million doing the front-end engineering with a European company, securing contracts. And then the big prize, Pieridae sells 20 years worth of gas to Europe, to a German utility called Uniper. And 20 years of gas, like that's a big deal, right? And it was half the capacity that Pieridae was designing. Pieridae was going to build at Goldboro. The original plan was we were going to build a facility that's 10 million metric tons of liquefied gas per year. It's a nice round number. In Qatar, in the Gulf, they build these things, these facilities, they build them in 10 million ton blocks, right? So we were going to design one of those, but we sold half the volume to Uniper. Now I got to say this about
$35 billion worth.
It's
right?
a $35 billion contract in like 2016, right? And it's an insane contract. And this is the crazy part. The deal for that was literally inked in Nova Scotia, and the team went out for like literally Subway subs, like kind of like such a low, like I'm exaggerating. I mean, we, nice dinner, but it was so low key. You won't find any news about this anywhere because the Germans didn't want this broadcast. Because at that time in 2016, the Germans are like deep in their green revolution, right? They're shutting down their nuclear industries, their coal-fired plants, and all these things. And they're building windmills everywhere. They started that a decade earlier, but it's a colossal fiasco. Like it's not working for them. So now they're scouring the world to get natural gas. And who else? And who are the Germans dependent on natural gas at that time?
Russia, yeah.
None other than Russia, right? So they're diversifying. So they're going around, they're buying some from Qatar, and they buy from us. So they saw our project. We showed them the whole plan, and they liked it. And so they bought, a 20-year contract worth $35 billion. But it goes one step further. The Uniper is actually so craving for natural gas that they're offering us loan guarantees. So they were backed by the German government. They loved what we were proposing to do. And they said, well, we won't finance it, but we'll give you loan guarantees that'll help you to get it financed, because we were a private company at that point, right? Small private company. So that's how crazy the project was. So in 2016, 17, the pieces are all lining up. And Pieridae even had an export permit from the National Energy Board. So it's all good. And that's 2015, 2016. And then yes, there was a bit of downturn in the economy. We all lived through it, and there was the markets were fluctuating a little bit, and then we elected the Liberals.
Yeah.
But electing the Liberals didn't, at first, that didn't slow us down, because we were on plan. We were finishing the engineering, and then there was, we were adjusting constantly. One of the things that was really fascinating right away is that we realized we could also bring in not just gas from the US, but we could bring in gas from Western Canada, from Alberta, because the pipeline infrastructure is almost all there. You can get from Alberta, from Empress, all the way to Ontario, and then you dip south a little bit into the US, connect to Enbridge, connect to this line, and away you go. So it was all good. So the pieces were coming together. And this is where it got interesting for us. So now, in about we had sunset clauses in our contract. So the Germans, Uniper had bought the gas, and don't quote me exactly, I'd have to go through my records, but way back then we kind of thought that the facility would be online around 2021, 2022, right? So we thought 3-4 years we'll get this built. And things don't, so without government interference, things actually don't move that fast anymore in Canada. Just follow jumping through the hoops, getting your environmental assessment, consulting with people, doing this, doing that, everything was taking time.
Yeah.
So and Uniper kept extending the contract. Every time we get to one of these sunset clauses, like you're supposed to have shovels in the ground by such and such a date, first delivery by such and date. We kept missing some of those dates, but Uniper kept extending the contract. We kept missing those dates because things are convoluted in this country. Getting the paperwork is crazy. But we continued, and then in around 2017, we were almost done. Like, the front end engineering was finished. We were happy with the engineering. We had all the letters of agreement with the pipeline companies. Almost everything was in place. So now we needed two things. We needed to get those final permits to start building, and then we needed to get what we call the FID, the final investment decision, and we needed to get the financing. Our deal was to show this project to the world and get somebody to finance it.
And those are issued by the federal or the provincial governments?
A combination, like lots of permits. In fact, good question. Lots of permits from God. When you're doing a project like this, you got Americans, provincials. So all we basically got the engineering done. So now we need to finance this project, and get the last little bit of approval. So I actually went as far as getting what's called a permit to construct. That was a major hurdle. Like, that was from the Nova Scotia Utilities Board, NSRB, the Nova Scotia Utilities and Review Board. I got the permit to construct. That's okay. and they didn't even know how to permit one of these things, so they subcontracted the permitting to Lloyd's of London. So we got the permit to construct. I mean, I had everything. So now it's the time to get the financing. And so now we're looking around, and in the first attempt to finance, a lot of the the capital said, "We love your project, but you're private, and there's no way we're giving $10 billion to a private company."
Right.
That made sense. Okay, so that made sense. So so Pieridae bought a company called Petrolia. That's where I came into the picture, really. Petrolia was an oil and gas producer in Quebec, and Petrolia had just been expropriated by the government of Quebec. So your viewers might not know this, but there's a lot of gas in Quebec, right? This shale revolution unlocked gas in Quebec. So there were companies like Petrolia, even Shell, even Talisman Energy, all sorts of little bigger and smaller companies were in Quebec working. And Petrolia was one of the ones we were one of the more successful ones. I actually exploited the regulatory framework, because the regulatory framework in Quebec is not an oil and gas framework, it's a mining framework.
Right.
But within the mining, I mean, in my way of thinking, getting gas out of the ground is just it's a mineral. Whether it's oil or gas or gold, you're mining. We just mine with slightly different techniques. So we got permits to drill wells in Quebec, and we got permits to frack wells in Quebec. So, but the Quebec government, the environmentalists, all sorts of people. I mean, that's a whole story in itself. I could spend a day talking about Quebec. So the government of Quebec became increasingly frustrated with us because they kept throwing hurdles at us, and we kept meeting them. I mean,
Right.
we estimated, billions of cubic feet of natural gas. So, they'd pass a rule saying, oh, you can't use salt water. You'll have to use fresh water. I'm like, I'll use fresh water. You can't use fresh water unless you collect it from melting snow. I'm like, there's a billion. If there's a billions of cubic feet here, I'll melt the snow. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Right? Like
Yeah.
they didn't understand. And so every time they'd pass these weird laws, we would meet we would comply with the law. So eventually the premier of Quebec like literally grabbed a piece of paper, wrote an executive order, said there will be no oil and gas exploitation, and he aimed it specifically at us, Petrolia. So he expropriated us.
Wow.
Today he's done, they've done that to all the other companies that were still in Quebec at the time, but we were the first ones to get expropriated.
Yeah.
So I had a shell of a company because we were listed on the Vancouver Exchange, and we had
Yeah.
all the controls and everything else. And here's Alfred Sorensen and Pieridae looking to go public. And so it was a match made in heaven. He bought us, and then he took all our controls. It weirdly, like Petrolia, our stock ticker symbol was PEA.V. Pieridae just said PEA works fine. So like there wasn't even a stock ticker symbol change, nothing like that.
Yeah.
And overnight, Pieridae continued to exist, but then became public.
Yeah.
And so then we thought that would make financing easier, but it didn't. But we were still moving ahead. But I mean, it was a big project, and I'll tell you this: like we were traveling all over the world, meeting with like, there's not a lot of capital in Canada.
No, that's right.
We're 3%
It
of the
all
world.
left.
It all left, and even when times were good, we're 3% of the world's capital. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the big money's in Malaysia, overseas, China, places like that. And I remember one day we're in we're in Kuala Lumpur meeting with the bank there, and same thing. You when you hear somebody say, "I love your project, but we really don't want to do business in Canada because it's too risky," and you just go like you're being told by bankers from other countries that Canada is too risky to do business.
Yeah.
And that's the level. That's what had become of Canada in 2018, 2019. Like
Wow.
all the protesting. Anyways, that's what it was. So we were struggling. Now, and think about it. At that point in 2000, and we've been in business for 6 years advancing this project.
Yeah.
It's like 40-50 million dollars spent that you're not getting a return on investment on, right? You're
Yeah.
taking some big risks and your capital's not working. So and now we're struggling. We're running out of cash. We're public, and people are investing in us, but even the investors lose patience because you can't do anything with, we're trying to get the financing. We did a lot of interesting things to stay in business, all the while advancing the project. I mean, we bought two Alberta companies. We bought Ikuma in about 2018, and we bought Shell's assets in 2019, 2020, because we figured rather than just be a midstreamer and bring other people's gas to Nova Scotia, we might as well own the gas, right? And
Right.
so, and buying Shell and assets like that allowed Pieridae to become more cash flow positive and stuff like that. So things are progressing, and then eventually we're literally at the point where we had an engineering firm on board to do the final work, and we had some investors that were seriously interested, and that's when the German government properly said, before we give you these loan guarantees, or before you execute on the loan guarantees and you call on the loan guarantees, we'd like some assurances from the government of Canada that they're on board with this project. And I showed them some of the permits, and they're like, yeah, that's fine. You got permits, but we want more. We want a letter from somebody saying they're on board. And at the time, it was Trudeau, and his resource minister was Amarjeet Sohi. They didn't sign. They wouldn't give us a letter because Trudeau literally said, "You're in a dying industry," and I'm like, how can I be in a dying he didn't say it to me, he said it to Alfred, but how can
Yeah.
we be in a dying industry when I'm showing to you, a $35 billion contract? Like
Yeah, I met
it's not up to you to decide,
That's
Mr.
that time when he
Trudeau.
was on the television talking about how there's no case for LNG in Canada.
That came a little bit after, but
Oh,
at that
okay.
point,
So it's that
privately
same.
to us, he was saying
Yeah.
there's no case for LNG, right? And
Unreal.
and he's already got all these weird bills. He's already got Bill C-69 and 47 and all these bills that are making it hard to develop. I mean, I lived through that when before all this, I was working for TransCanada trying to do Keystone XL and Energy East,
Yeah.
and I have colleagues who were doing Trans Mountain. I mean, the frustration of trying to advance some of these large projects is it's exactly what it is. It's super
Yeah.
frustrating. So Trudeau wouldn't give us the letter. And I mean, I added to the puzzle yesterday. I shared this morning. Weirdly, the only person who gave us a letter of support was the premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley. And I have that letter. I scanned that
Yeah.
letter. I shared that letter. I don't think Rachel knew what she was signing. I don't think Rachel signed that letter. I think it just so happened that some deputy minister or somebody senior in her cabinet knew the importance of LNG and something. So somebody wrote the letter for her. It's kind of a neutral tone letter, slipped it across her desk, and she signed it. So I really don't think, but it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough um, for the Germans to feel confident about the loan guarantees. But that didn't stop us. I mean, we continued on with the project. Now, I left that project at that point. I mean, I started to see the writing on the wall, and it was COVID and it was other things. So I left Pieridae in about 2020, I think. And they put on a valiant battle and they continued trying to do everything they can. But at that point, it was all they could to just stay afloat, even though they'd bought Shell and everything else. You've burned a lot of capital, and I hate that part. I hate the people that see the Pieridae of 2020 trying to get money from AIMCO or trying to apply for certain programs and things like that, because it does look desperate, but it's not because the company was mismanaged. The
No.
company, I think, put on like so many other companies, like Trans Mountain. I mean, Kinder Morgan was an example. Like Kinder Morgan is a very reputable, excellent company. They didn't fail at building Trans Mountain. They just couldn't do it anymore. Their shareholders and their board of directors said, we're wasting money. Let's put the money somewhere else. And then when they pulled the pin, a few people, Rachel Notley at the time and a few others said, whoa, we gotta revive this. We've gone too far with the regulations. So yeah, so Goldboro was abandoned more or less in the last 2-3 years by Pieridae. Is it a viable project? I think it absolutely is. I mean, let me put this. Well, actually, I've been talking a lot.
Yeah.
This
No,
is
no,
a
this
bit
is
of a
good.
one-sided podcast right now,
Yeah.
but like, ask me some questions and then I'll keep going. But
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, we've seen that here in BC as well. I mean, every project that tries to get itself off the ground is just like it's sort of this slow strangulation where nobody ever actually outright comes out and says, "Well, we don't want this." It's this that like as soon as what you described, that as soon as you pass through any hurdle, there's three more that pop up, and it's just sort of this. It's almost like the lawyers siphon every dollar out of you, and then in that regulatory process, and then there's nothing left, and then it dies anyways, you know?
absolutely, and then for comparison, um, at the time when Alfred was conceiving of Goldboro, there was no LNG in the Gulf of Mexico. Nobody, right? And so and then 7 years later, Canada has just built an LNG terminal in Kitimat, and it just made its first shipment. But 7 years later, the Americans just celebrated, I think, their 700th shipment from the Gulf of Mexico. Like it's
Yeah.
so insane the head start that we had, and the advantage. We had a head start, an economic advantage, a transit advantage, a proximity advantage, a long-term alliance, friendship, forged in war alliance. Like we had everything, and then you got Justin Trudeau that says there's no case for it, right? I mean, the Chancellor of Germany, subsequent to us, came back to Canada what 3 times in the last 3 years, and every time he was snubbed by Trudeau. I mean, one time Trudeau took him to go see like a battery making facility in Kingston. I feel sorry. That poor guy's like, I'm not here for that, man. I want gas. I got 65 million citizens. I screwed up. My green energy transition's not working. The Russians are shutting down the pipeline. I'm held hostage. I need gas. And then Trudeau insisted that there's no case for it. And so I'm frustrated now when I see what's happening with Trump and with Carney and others. Like, Trump is not a threat to Canada. Trump is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. Now, I'm glad a few people are waking up and that we're talking about this today, but I'm still not convinced that Mark Carney has real intentions to move forward with real LNG and real oil developments in this country.
No, and what I find scary about it too is that if I mean the fact that they had to pass a law to be able to suspend the law to get national projects of interest through, right? Like, I mean, this basically gives absolute power to the central government, and I mean, what's the point of a rule of law where you can say, okay, I want to grow flowers for flower shops, whatever. Like, you shouldn't ha there should be a set of single rules that everyone follows, and then you get to chance to participate in that market. If you have
Yes.
to go and beg for the government to allow you, that's not actually how a democratic country works.
Exactly, and spot on. I mean, as a man from the industry side, we just want to know the rules, and don't
Exactly.
change the rules. You're allowed to set any rules you want, and then we'll meet the rules. Like if the rules are legit, then and we can meet them. We'll decide whether it's economic or not. It shouldn't be the government that decides. And so, yeah, and that's the other frustrating thing in this country, and that's why other countries are afraid to do work here now in capital. I mean, the time value of capital is important.
Yeah.
It's critical, right? I mean, the moment you cut your check, you don't want to have to wait 12 years before you start getting a return on your investment. And it was already risky enough to do projects in Canada, in the last 50 years with time horizons of 2-3 years. But now when the time horizon is 6, that's one problem. That's the first problem is you're slow to get the return on investment. But the other thing that really scares foreign investors, and people need to understand this, is if every subsequent government completely changes the rules and expropriates you or does things like that, that creates like investors. The number one thing capital is evaluating when deciding on doing a project is a risk assessment. We call it a risk assessment, whether it's environmental risk, political risk, capital risk, financial risk. And nowadays, the political risk in this country is this big giant wedge of a project. Like we're projects are being killed because the political risk is too high, which is insane. Like we can't keep doing that. Even I personally, I don't like that. Like even if I benefit from it, I don't like governments that flip flop. The whole idea that the next government says, oh, we're just going to reverse the carbon tax, and then the next one comes back and says we're going to put it back in, then one comes in after that says we're going to take it out. Like that, you can't. Nobody can function with governments that keep flip flopping like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the Kinder Morgan project, like it just seemed like there's actually a strategy almost coming out of Ottawa of following up each environmental review with some new thing. Like it's almost it feels like observing from the sidelines, like there's actually a systematic injection of new rules every time you start to make any kind of headway, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the pipeline bans and all of the tanker ban and all that they brought in BC and stuff like that.
They're nonsensical. I mean,
Yeah.
the tanker ban's another example, right? Like we're banning tanker traffic, and you can show like there's clear evidence that the number of tanker incidents around the world has gone down dramatically in the last 40 years. I mean, with double hulled vessels, better navigation charts, better everything. And then there's places in the world like in Turkey by Istanbul, that Bosphorus Strait or whatever. I mean, there's places with huge tanker traffic and they have no incidents. And we're worried about, like let's do the math. I mean, how many tankers would, even if Trans Mountain is 500,000 barrels a day, that's a 2 million barrel tanker every 4 days. So in 365 days, that's 90 tankers in a year. We can manage that.
Yeah.
But we ban it outright. And then the other thing I like to remind people is, some people are in favor of certain projects. Fine. So maybe you're in favor of a wind farm or a solar farm or a hospital or a new highway. I don't care what you're in favor of. But by allowing this protesting on one side and selecting one industry to hinder, it just creates a precedent. And I dare say we shot ourselves in the foot across the spectrum. We're not going to build huge, Carney's promoting nuclear energy. You think we're going to build a nuclear reactor? Even the greenest thing, right? Like you guys in BC, how long did it take for Site C to be approved?
Oh, it's surreal. Yeah.
It's surreal, right? So people protest because they're against one form of energy and they're in favor of something else, but they're damaging everything. I mean, capital is not going to come in here and build an electric vehicle plant. We saw that. I mean, there's people that want to build those all over the world, but they won't build them in Canada unless the Canadian government gives them $11 billion or something like that. And so we're creating a big problem. We have created a big problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I noticed about, and I wonder if that was already in place when you guys were working on your project, that New Brunswick has passed a fracking gas moratorium, so they're not allowing fracked gas to cross their land, if I understand it correctly.
They lifted it now. They
did.
They're the first
Okay.
one to lift it. Quebec still has theirs. That's such a weird. That's an example. I mean, I was doing when we were doing Goldboro. One unfortunate circumstance is Nova Scotia doesn't have a lot of electricity. Okay, it doesn't have a lot of electricity. I wish it had electricity because while we were building Goldboro, we needed to run big giant generators to the process of liquefying the natural gas requires a lot of compression and stuff like that. So the compression we were going to install was going to be gas driven. We were going to install natural gas turbines, jet engines to turn the compressors to liquefy the gas because I didn't have electricity. And Nova Scotia Nova Scotia fell in line with Trudeau. Trudeau slapped a carbon tax, and Nova Scotia, without even thinking, said, "Oh, we're going to do a carbon tax too." And I'm like, "Do you realize that your carbon tax just added $250 million a year in operating costs to this project? Like, you're killing this project. You're killing this 5,000 people project, this $10 billion investment. You're killing it with a carbon tax." Like it was crazy. And so it was a wonderful project. I wish, like I said, it was just a head start. And to me, that's the most frustrating thing is that we lost on that head start and stagnated. And then I look at what the Americans have done in the Gulf, what the Qataris have done in Qatar. I mean, Qatar gets to, was it Qatar? Where was the World Cup last year or 2 years ago? It was in Qatar, right?
Might have been. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, they get to show off to the world what cheap energy development does. I mean, they get to take $2 billion and blow it building stadiums and inviting the world to a big giant party. Like that could have been us, but no, we're. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't they also throw something at you that you guys had to do a carbon capture project to offset the emissions from the plant?
That was a little bit after my time, but that's all in there. I mean, ultimately, I do believe in Ellen, if the goal is to reduce emissions of the planet around, and I'm not sold on this, but
no, I'm definitely not, but yeah,
I'm not sold on it, but let's say we are. Let's say the goal is to reduce emissions. Well, then if Canadian natural gas can be exported to some other country and it can displace coal or cow dung or whatever, then it's a win-win for the planet. But we're not even thinking that way. We're thinking localized and shooting ourselves in the foot locally, and it doesn't help.
Yeah.
Like the policies don't help. I mean,
Well, how much would that have added to your production costs to have to do this carbon capture alongside to offset all of your emissions? Because I imagine that's not small potatoes either.
no, it's not small potatoes. I mean, you're adding another 5% to the cost, which is already,
Yeah.
um, that is such a weird idea. This whole idea of extracting carbon from somewhere, the whole carbon neutrality, like that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with reducing emissions. I'm also okay with trying to reduce pollution. And then a project like we were proposing at this scale, the pollution and the emission, the efficiencies are so high. You're talking
Yeah.
like such high efficiencies that to capture a little bit more becomes exorbitantly expensive, right?
Yeah.
Um, but where was I going with this? I lost my thought, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I noticed that the Pieridae has now completely abandoned its eastern projects and pivoted all the way to Alberta. So they're still in Canada, but only hanging on by a toenail in Alberta, I guess, eh?
They're doing okay now, and actually things are turning around for them. I
Yeah.
think things will turn around. They did things that to the outsiders appear a little bit desperate near the end. Again, you're trying to survive and stay afloat. They signed a couple of bad deals, but the deals are coming to term, and then I think they'll come out okay. They'll come out okay. And after
Yeah.
Christmas, there's a few bad contracts that expire, but no, I hate the people that say whether it's Pieridae or TransCanada or the companies that they were mismanaged and
No,
and
no.
that the projects died because the companies were mismanaged. Those folks have no idea
Yeah.
how um how much obstacles the government is throwing in the way. Yeah, and I'll give you a story. It's not related to Goldboro, but it was related to when I was working in Quebec. This is how silly the rules were. Like we had the permit to frack and they wouldn't let me use salt water, which is abundant, which is all around me, right? I'm on an
Sure.
island in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and there's salt water. You can't use salt water, can't use fresh water. So I have to use runoff from the rivers, right? So I got to pump off the rivers and then I can use snow melt. And and then as part of the development, they made me drill these wells all over the place that were called observation wells. So it's just a hole, and then you just monitor the water level in the observation wells. So one of my guys says, "Hey, why don't we use the observation wells to fill the storage tank of water? Like we needed water to frack. So let's just use the observation wells." I'm like, okay, it sounds like an interesting idea. We went to the government and asked the government if we can do that. And you could tell he didn't want to give me permission to do that. He said, "You'll have to test the well." I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then he's trying to block me. He's like, "You'll have to test a well for 90 days." I mean, it's not even in the rules. He's making up, "You'll have to test this water well for 90 days, this observation well." So I'm like, okay, what do I do with the water while I'm testing the well and I'm producing the water? He's like, "You can do whatever you want with it." I'm like, "I'll take a permit to test the well." So we tested, and he was looking at us like we were, like, what just happened here? We tested the well, and while we were testing the well, all the water that we produced from the well, we put it in the storage tank and used it to frack.
Yeah.
So, like, his rules made absolutely no sense, and we were way smarter. I mean, we had their rules. Like, they don't even know their own rules. That's the other funny thing. So they often don't even know their own rules. So, yeah, yeah. So I hope I'm excited now. I'm very excited that Kitimat, that LNG Canada is going.
Yeah.
That's why I want to talk, right? Because even though I'm out of the industry, I got to do everything we can. We got to do everything we can to help industry, help get Canada back on track. I mean, we are a nation that has this amazing resource that the world wants.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I wanted to say. Like when Trudeau said you're in a dying industry, it's like, no, 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 no. We're in an industry that you're trying to kill. There's a big difference. There's a big difference, right? So
Yeah.
we're not in a dying industry, and we're not, and to your viewers, we're not in a dying industry. And the demand for natural gas and oil is insatiable and it's not reducing anytime soon, right? Like the planet consumes. I always say this to people, like the world consumption of oil, just oil, is 100 million barrels a day.
Yeah.
Like not a week, not a year, a day. 100 million barrels a day. And Canada, Canada makes 5.5 of that. Alberta accounts for almost all of it. And we could double it. We could make more oil. The modern technology is it's not what people used to envision. Like, it's way cleaner. People want it. And think of the projects think of the infrastructure and the services we could provide ourselves. We could be like Qatar. I mean,
Yeah.
10 million barrels of oil a day gives a lot of royalties to governments, federal and provincial, and pays for a lot of schools and a lot of teachers.
Yeah.
But we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean the alternative is China is building coal plants. Like I mean it's like if you go with natural gas, you've got way cleaner. So there's a real incentive if you're trying to reduce pollution to actually push for cheap LNG rather than expensive LNG that ends up being crowded out by coal.
Yep. I think the Chinese are starting up a coal-fired power plant about every 3 days. Like,
Yeah,
it's a phenomenal. I mean, you got to go to China to appreciate China, right? Like,
yeah,
most. I've been to. I've had the pleasure, call it pleasure. It's not really a pleasure, but I've gone to some industrial towns in China as part of work to secure contracts. When you go to cities like Chengdu or Shanghai or places like that, where cities with 15 million people, you just and then you talk and you go, wow, you guys have 50 cities. Like, there's 50 cities in China, maybe not 50, but there's definitely more than 30 cities with 10 million people
yeah.
each. Like, wow. you know they yeah, no, it's crazy. So yeah.
From where you're like with your connections in the industry, do you feel like there's been a shift since Trudeau left, as other than, great speeches and talking about getting stuff done? Like, I mean, from where we're sitting, it's sort of I'm quite cynical as to whether any of these projects that Carney is dreaming of are ever going to happen.
The industry is yeah, I'm still in touch with a lot of colleagues. It's wait and see right now. Like,
Yeah,
it's I mean, realistically, Carney came into power and then basically went into recess right away, right? He got
yeah,
elected in April. And they sat for what, like the shortest we've ever seen. They sat for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then they've
yeah,
been on summer holidays talking a lot. I like what Danielle Smith is doing here. I mean,
yeah.
Carney, what's the bill? Is it Bill 5 or Bill
Yeah, C5, I think it was, or
C5 is the
C5 or
one?
C6, yeah, something like
Yeah, C5 is the one economy bill where he wants to streamline the processes. He asked each premier to submit their list of projects. And I know that here in Alberta, we only submitted one. And it was kind of like it was a test. We basically submitted another pipeline,
that.
another pipeline parallel with basically Northern Gateway. We
Oh, okay, yeah,
resubmitted Northern Gateway, and it's a test, right? If Carney's true, then and he wants to facilitate a project like this, then he would have to repeal C69, 47, and a bunch of other things. So we're going to learn a lot about Carney and whether he's serious when Parliament resumes
yeah,
in a couple of weeks. I mean, Trump is a wake up call. Like, Trump's a wake up call. Like,
yeah,
it's I'm looking at a lot of other numbers. Like, our trade to the US, like the deficit is growing, right? The deficit
yeah,
is growing. Like, it was 19 billion last month, not last quarter, last month.
yeah,
And Trump is serious about that. The tariffs are having an immediate impact. And it like there's shovel ready projects almost, and that's a solution to our problems. Like,
yeah,
going back to what we actually, that's something else I want to talk about a little bit. I mean, we are a I did this. Let me capture my thoughts. So Trump's telling us what he's going to do, right?
yeah,
He's pretty straightforward. He's going to bring back manufacturing. He's going to play on their strength. They're the largest economy in the world. They don't want to be subsidizing everybody else. He's imposing tariffs. He's bringing jobs back home, going back to manufacturing and the things that they were good at, things that had moved out of the U.S. over time. And we need to do that same kind of introspection in this country. Like, I did just for fun the other day. I looked at the top 20 nations on earth and I said, of the top 20 nations, what is the top quarter? What sector provides the top quarter of their GDP? So I just wanted to see how diversified economies were and where they stood. And it was fascinating. The U.S. is high tech, finances, and manufacturing. China's manufacturing. Australia's agriculture and mining. France is tourism and food, and so forth. And you look at those. And Canada's the top 25%. The top 25% of our economy comes from real estate and insurance, which are almost false economies, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, completely.
completely, and it's like, wow, how are we going to compete against Australia and Brazil and nations that are mining and doing things? And so we've completely abandoned what we used to be good at. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of know why, the World Economic Forum and the UN agendas and things like that. I mean, but basically, we used to be a nation that was good at cutting wood, fishing, growing wheat, producing oil, extracting potash. And somehow or other, we convinced ourselves that those were all bad things. And then we went and started doing the same thing as everybody else. Like, let's go
Yeah.
into AI, let's go into movie making. Like we stopped playing to our strength, which is completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so Trump is a wake-up call, and it's affecting us real fast. Like the things that we're strong on, Trump's
Yeah.
even stronger, and so I think we're gonna have to pivot back to oil and gas and lumber
Yeah.
and potash.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you look at the side, like if you've ever, I'm sure you've driven across this country more than a few times. And I mean, there's just no way that any of those other industries are competitive anywhere in the interior of our country. Like you can do manufacturing on the outer edges, but the transport costs are just so huge. There's just no way that any of those other industries are ever going to be, able to replace, the resource industry. There's no way, you know.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the only one that we might now have a weird advantage on is, uh, I'm looking into AI. I guess we might
Yeah.
have an advantage on AI, right? I mean, we have you can put that in places that are fairly remote and cold and have other energy, and it exports easily. But you're right, you don't. Yeah, I always say that to people. I mean, I why would, if you're I don't know, a game developer, and you can program from anywhere in the world, why would you come settle in northern Alberta or
Exactly.
Manitoba? You're going to go down to California and places like that. Like, and this whole concept of infinite diversification is silly. Like,
Yeah.
it's completely silly. I mean, at the at the at the macro level, sure, there's a Canada has to be diversified, but not at the micro level. So Alberta's oil, Saskatchewan is potash,
Yeah.
Newfoundland can be fish, you guys can be tourism and lumber, but then when you look as a whole, Canada's well diversified. We shouldn't all be competing against each other. I mean, ask the people of PEI how they feel now about the fact that Alberta produces more potatoes than PEI.
Yeah.
Like, you told us to diversify, so we diversified ourselves, and now we're taking other
Yeah.
provinces out of the out of business. So
Well,
yeah,
and there's a huge cost if you kill the resource industry, that all the remote areas collapse. So I mean, then you're left with a country that has basically a bunch of great big cities and nothing else. And you already see that, like you drive through northern Ontario, and there's entire regions that are just falling apart. There's the hotels have boards across the windows and stuff like that. Like there's just nothing left of the local economy because it's
yeah.
all been throttled. I think that to me is it. Just another one of the symptoms of what this kind of regulatory strangulation by all these ideologues in Ottawa and in Victoria and in Edmonton, that
It,
what's going on, you know?
it is what it is, right? It's ideology gone amok. And this is one thing I always say. Maybe I think we are finally getting to that point where I always say that in the battle of ideology versus reality or pragmatism, eventually reality wins. It's
Yeah.
it's always been the case. Some ideologies do succeed, but very seldom. And I think we're getting to that point now. We're having a solid dose of reality that got thrown at us by Trump. People said Trump is a threat. No, he's not a threat. He's doing what's good for him and his country, and
Yeah.
he's a wake up call for us that some of our ideas are a little bit out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it sounds like you have some optimism about how things are going with the way Alberta is pushing back on this now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
well, but and again, proof is in the pudding. I mean, I'm challenging. I'm famous for challenging Danielle. She
Yeah.
kind of issued a moratorium to, or not a moratorium, an ultimatum. She's What show was I watching? I must have been. She kind of issued an ultimatum to whoever will be the future prime minister. Right? She laid out some conditions, and right now, Carney's not doing any of those things. I mean, back to your original question, I I got nervous when Carney got elected, to be honest, because I thought, ooh, he's a better he's a slightly more intelligent version of Trudeau.
Yeah.
Because even under Trudeau, I was nervous. You know, quite you and I, we're Westerners. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lifetime of knowing that the election results have determined that the Manitoba border,
Yeah.
right? That suddenly we turn at 6, the polls close here at 8 p.m. Now we turn on TV and we go, okay, election's decided. So when Trudeau got first elected, I thought, ooh, we're in for 25 years, 30 years of him, because he'll continuously win elections out east. And then to guarantee his success out east, all he has to do is throw a few carrots at Alberta and BC, and then he's guaranteed. So I found his tactics unusual. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
figure out why he was so aggressive towards
Yeah.
Alberta. I think it's personal for him. Like there's a personal factor there. So then comes Carney, and I'm thinking the same thing about Carney. Like he could, if he's smart, he can continuously win out east and then just throw a few carrots Alberta's way. We'll see what he does. But now what I'm kind of thinking is it's not about Carney. It's not even about it's about something bigger. Like
Yeah.
it is something bigger, and they're just the front men, and Trudeau got replaced by another guy, and I don't think the agenda will
Yeah.
change. So my bet is we're going to keep going down this path, and something will snap at some point, and I don't
Yeah.
know what, but
Yeah.
it's not gonna correct itself smoothly. The
No.
correction that's coming our way is going to be ugly.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the last question I had kind of for you that ties into that, which is like, listening to Carney talking about all of these, national energy projects, and then you hear Quebec or Manitoba say, well, it doesn't meet their criteria, and they just shut it down. And it's like, are we actually making any headway if we release the pressure from the federal level, and yet this very same thing is happening at the provincial level? We're not actually going to ever actually break out of this circular trap.
That's that again. We're in violent agreement. That's the trap. Like the relationship is not a parent-child relationship. The relationship is Ottawa is supposed to bring the parties to the table and help negotiate, and I don't think Ottawa is doing that. And it
Yeah.
needs and we would need a very sophisticated Ottawa, and very sophisticated statesmen to make that happen, and I don't see that happening
Yeah.
in I mean, what you mentioned is a perfect example. Like, boy, it feels like like 3 months ago, everybody was like Team Canada.
Yeah.
Okay, Team Canada. Well, like Team
Yeah.
Canada, and then as soon as the tournament was over, well, okay, you go back your way, you go back your way, and everybody forgot. Everybody threw their jerseys, put them in the closet, and then went back to their old habits. I mean, yeah, pretty literally 3 months ago, Quebec was almost saying, yeah, we'll consider a pipeline, and then the threat seemed to subside, and no pipeline. I mean, the
Yeah.
pipeline's minor. Like I want Quebec to give up on. I think we're putting the whole country at risk of a trade war just because of the dairy cartels in Quebec. Like, that's insane. Never mind the pipelines, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I was encouraged when Danielle Smith laid out a set of criteria. Like it was kind of her ultimatum that she made to Carney when he came in. But I'm not actually, like, I've been sort of keeping an eye on those boxes, and I'm not able to tick any of them off yet. Like,
No,
it's like the EV mandate, and the opening up the corridor to the east and to the north. Like,
stop with the net zero
yeah,
power grid, repeal Bill
exactly.
C-69. Yeah, there's no progress on anything. I'd be we're in for a very interesting thing. I do look forward to Parliament resuming. I think Mark Carney's going to have to shuffle his cabinet. I mean, I think he's had a short, honeymoon. He's had 160 days of honeymoon. He realized that he's surrounded by incompetence. Like,
Yeah,
he can, like, Stephen Guilbeault and Melanie Jolie and all those people, they all have to go. But his talent pool is so shallow.
yeah,
So on the sideline, I cheer for that. I mean, I'm kind of happy. I'm on the record right now as saying, let's this minority government is different than the last minority government. I mean, the last one was propped up by the NDP, and so managed to do a bit of damage. I think this minority government has no props, no propping, and so let's let it sit for a while until we're really ready to defeat it.
yeah.
But I don't think anybody's ready to defeat the Liberals. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of what I was looking forward to being able to talk to you because I think that for people to understand, like it's one thing to see, that the investment dollars are leaving and that the jobs are leaving and all that. But if you actually, talking to people that are on the front lines of this to say like this is why, like these are the hurdles that have to be ironed out in this country. Otherwise, all the good talk doesn't go anywhere. Like it,
Well, and I like to, and I like to always say this thing is you just reminded me of something. Um, these are all problems. Like I wish that the government would actually lay out what the problem is, right? So is the problem that you want to reduce emissions, or is the
yeah,
problem that you want to reduce pollution, or is the problem that you want to increase manufacturing? I don't care. Whatever it
yeah,
is, tell us the problem and let and if it's a technical problem, like if you're worried about, like, don't ban tankers.
yeah,
If the problem is you don't want spills, then lay out some rules that to try and prevent it, but you don't need to go to the outright bans. Have faith in our scientists and our engineers, our accountants, our bankers. Have faith in our private sector. It can solve some pretty complex problems. Like, we have a history in this country. Like, Trans Mountain's an example, right? Like, people
yeah,
were opposed to Trans Mountain. I'm like, the original Trans Mountain pipeline was built in 1956 and is still running today,
yeah,
built with 1956 technology. How brilliant is that? So, and then the counter, like, it's also a weird argument. Like, I'll say to people like wind and solar are old technologies, and people go, yeah, but they've been modernized. Or I'll say electric vehicles are old technology. Yeah, but they've been modernized. Well, if you're willing to give the benefit of the doubt of one technology taking advantage of advancements in science and modernizing and becoming better, why wouldn't you give the same benefit of the doubt to pipelines or drilling or whatever? Like,
yeah,
resource extract, every industry we do in this country has gotten better over time.
yeah,
So yeah, that's all I want as an engineer and as a Canadian, is just the opportunity, not this outright ban.
yeah,
And then I mean, we could keep talking about this. Like, I want that. I also think the natives want that.
yeah,
That's the other thing that's fascinating, right? Is that how some people want somehow or other speak on behalf of the natives without
yeah,
actually ever asking them, like, hey, how do you feel about pipelines and energy and this and that? Like, they want to improve themselves. So yeah,
yeah.
the problems are solvable.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
find like I remember during the Wet'suwet'en protests that watching on Twitter at that time, there was so many of the locals there that were speaking out in support of that pipeline, and that the band councils were all in support, but it was all the hereditary chiefs that were against it. And then Trudeau went and negotiated with the hereditary chiefs. Like it was just
yeah.
it's like the entire system, nobody's talking to the right people, and it's just all being gamed in support of this ideology, you know?
Well, I had the same experience in Goldboro. I mean, to
Yeah.
obtain my permit to construct, I had to do some big consultation, and I was blown away. I had like I was used to some protests when I was in Quebec. Now I'm in Nova Scotia, and I'm doing these open houses, and I'm making sure I got a lot of staff, because it's like, holy smokes, thousands of people are coming out to our open house, thousands of people in support. I was blown away. The
Wow.
absolute support was massive by the locals. And if you spoke to the locals, they knew what was going on. It wasn't the locals that were against the projects. It
Yeah.
was people being bussed in from Lord knows where to come and protest. They'd literally say, that guy's not from here. I'm like, okay, I got it. Like, don't let him sign. That guy's not from here. I mean, you're in Goldboro, Nova Scotia, like next door to Antigonish. Like, there's
Yeah.
1,500 people. They all literally all knew each other, like, don't let him sign. Okay, I won't. Yeah, yeah.
Surreal.
Fascinating. Yeah, yeah.
Marty, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah,
Um,
glad to make your acquaintance anytime, man.
you
Any
bet.
topic, happy to chat. I like, if you haven't figured it out, I like talking.
You bet. Yeah, no, this is great. Where can people follow you? Because I mean, your account is a fantastic one to follow. So I've been enjoying
I'm on
everything that you
Twitter. I
post.
mean, yeah, you introduced me as Marty Belanger, but I'm Marty up north on Twitter.
Yeah,
I'm sure some people have figured out. So look, I'm on my third account on Twitter. So this one is Marty up north underscore two. I started with Marty up north, then it was Marty up north underscore one, then Marty up north underscore two. It's welcome to censorship. I mean, there was a amen for thank God for Elon Musk. He did save Twitter, because Twitter of 2021, 22, boy, I had to self-censor all the time and then you'd get zapped. So yeah, that's where you can find me, Marty up North. Find me there, folks. I love interacting. I try to answer a lot of questions.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Cheers, everyone.